Now, Chinese state-sponsored hackers breached the US Treasury Department's computer security guardrails this month and stole documents. The hackers compromised third-party cybersecurity service provider Beyond Trust and were able to access unclassified documents as well. Here's more.
The US Treasury Department said Monday that a China state-sponsored actor was behind a cyber breach, resulting in access to some of its workstations. The incident happened earlier this month when the actor compromised a third-party cybersecurity service provider and was able to remotely access the Treasury workstations and some unclassified documents. Treasury contacted the US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency after it was alerted of the situation by its provider, Beyond Trust. The compromised Beyond Trust service has been subsequently taken offline. The Treasury has attributed the incident to a China state-sponsored advanced persistent threat actor. An APT refers to a cyber attack where an intruder establishes and maintains unauthorized access to a target, remaining undetected for a sustained period of time. The department did not provide further details on what was affected by the breach, but said more information would be released in a supplemental report at a later date. Bureau Report, DD India.
And now let's take a look at this brief history of alleged cyber attacks by China on the US and Europe.
In March 2024, US Department of Justice indictment revealed that 7 hackers associated with Chinese government were charged with computer intrusions targeting perceived critics of China and US businesses and politicians. Over 10,000 malicious emails impacting thousands of victims across multiple continents were reported. As alleged in the indictment, it was part of a global hacking operation which targeted journalists, political officials, and companies to repress critics of China and its regime, compromise government institutions, and steal trade secrets. May 2024, Chinese hackers hit Britain's Ministry of Defence with a cyber attack that exposed sensitive information on every troop apart from the UK's Special Forces. The attackers targeted a third-party contractor to access names and bank details of current and former members of the armed forces. The UK Minister of Defence stopped short of publicly naming China as the culprit. February 2024, Chinese spies placed malware in a Dutch military network in 2023. The network was not connected to the Defence Ministry's main network, which reduced damage. Netherlands has publicly accused China of cyber espionage. August 2023, Chinese hackers obtained personal and political emails of a US congressman from Nebraska. The hackers exploited the same Microsoft vulnerability that gave them access to emails from the State Department and Department of Commerce. May 2023, Chinese hackers breached communications networks at a US outpost in Guam. The hackers used legitimate credentials, making it harder to detect them. December 2022, Chinese government-linked hackers stole at least $20 million in COVID-19 relief funds from the US government, including Small Business Administration loans and unemployment insurance money. The US Secret Service announced they retrieved half of the stolen funds.
And now to discuss more on this, I am joined by Mr. Shimal Bachari, who is the expert IT and digital services. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Bachari. Thank you so much for joining us here in our studios. When we talk about it, you just took a look at the report of the incidences that have taken place in previous so many occasions. When we talk about the growing number of instances, and if we talk about this particular instance as well, where US Treasury calls this as a major incident, why, first of all, US Treasury took a lot of time to identify this threat, because this happened in the early days of December?
See, very many times when the cyber attacks happen, nowadays, they basically exploit some vulnerability, or as in this case, there was a third party Beyond Trust that had its key hacked. So when sometimes, later you try and look at your whole network and you try and do, whatever bit of audit and all, then you realize the extent of an attack. So sometimes intrusions happen, people get into the system and they lie low in the system, and they are yet able to pick up information and contact on as it has happened here. So very many times a cyber attack might not be visible right at that moment it has happened, but later you realize when and the full manifestations of that attack.
And when we talk about it, what could be the possible repercussions of this act that has happened? Because when we talk about US and China, both are major economies, and this is a serious breach.
Well, you see, there is a history of Chinese attacks on American networks. You've just shown the graphics before. It's going on for quite some time. Even during President Obama's time, they came to an agreement in 2013 about how they will not, get into, or Chinese will not get into the American network likewise. But this has not happened. Continuously there are attempts, and sometimes even successful, by very many times the state actors or even non-state actors, but backed by the state. Particularly in the case of China, this has happened. So even this particular incident of the Treasury Department's computers, a few losing or being compromised, there also there is a particular kind of activity that is generally seen to the Chinese, the advanced persistent threat, APT, that is known. So APTs are generally identified with Chinese attempts at snooping and trying to get into the networks, and APT 31 in China, run by the PLA, is quite notorious for various kind of hacking attempts every time. So while this attack on the Treasury Department, they have named it a major attack, but it really hasn't taken those sensitive data out. It is more of non-sensitive data that has gone on. But the worrying part is that they are still able to get into such networks, which brings us to the point that how do we secure, is it only the patch management and network protocols that we put secures, or today there are other ways, just as this case, the third party agent that was there, they were compromised. So there are various ways in which cyber attacks are happening, and the Chinese have really gained a lot of access thus. And right now, with the usage of artificial intelligence, they have been able to make a force multiplication of their capabilities that they otherwise had on getting into all these hacking attempts. So the millions of attempts and efforts, permutation combinations that are being attempted using AI is now the larger threat that worries everyone.
Like you and I, everybody is now concerned about cyber attacks, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself raised a cautious alert on how we should be careful about it, and he's always very cautious about AI as well and the technological use of it. How prepared are we going into 2025 when we talk about security and cyber alert?
Well, I think the government of India is very, very concerned and serious. The National Cyber Security Coordinator in the office of the National Security Advisor is directly mandated to not only coordinate with the ministries and agencies, but also to be able to take actions when it needs to. So the various police forces and entities that work on the ground ultimately go to a national security perspective when it comes to cyber attacks. So we are, I won't say this is something that you can say you are foolproof prepared, because they try and exploit. This is a very dynamic game, but we are not neglecting anything, and we are trying to bolster our available defenses to much larger capacities by investments, by getting in more people into the system, by bringing in more secure practices into the system. And particularly, as you mentioned, when AI comes and is seen as quite a disruptor, and even in terms of launching cyber attacks and all, I think India is focused on security aspects of AI and how you particularly take care of them. This is a focus of the government. So I would think that in the days and years to come, this is going to be one of the highest priority. As you know, cyber security is a real perspective of national security as the government has defined. So there would be far much more steps beyond only the laws, but also in terms of making yourself available to be able to detect network threats as and when it happens and then take corrective steps.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Shimal Bachari, for joining us and bringing us a rounded perspective on how the world is looking at cyber attacks right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.